Speedrunning. Speedrunning is one of the most fascinating things to behold in the video gaming world. It is truly one of the best tests of focus, commitment, and sheer G-fuel. And it's pretty fun to watch too. Something about watching someone who has committed countless hours to a game just beat the absolute crap out of it is always pretty fun to watch. I mean, you've got 1/1000th of a frame inputs, completely bonkers game breaks, and people making and traveling through actual parallel universes in a game that is under 100 megabytes made in 1996. I still don't understand any of that at all, and that pretty well describes my understanding of a lot of speedruns, which in my opinion makes them all the more fun to watch. But what I do understand is that speedrunning a game takes an impossibly long amount of practice. Speedrunners will repeatedly redo sections of their runs over and over and over again, honing in their skills and knowledge of multiple tens of portions of their games until they can do it with their eyes closed, and then they do it with their feet. Like, what the fuck? It really is an incredible feat, some of these speedruns. The muscle memory, the precision, the game knowledge, all of it. And that applies to pretty much every game that has a speedrun, regardless of its size, genre, or apparent ease. But even though speedrunning is arguably very difficult regardless of what game is being sped run, one genre of speedrunning takes that difficulty, that commitment necessity, that juice tomfoolery a step further, or more accurately, a step in an entirely new direction. It's not because there are too many frame-perfect moves, too many impossibly tight sections, or parallel universes. It's because altogether the nature of this genre creates an entirely new landscape for speedrunners to learn and overcome. What does that entail, you frivolous, frightening ball of fro, you may inquire? Well, to answer that question, let's delve into the wildly wacky world of roguelike speedrunning. I'm sure for most of you, roguelike isn't exactly the first thing that comes to mind when you think speedrun. But to our surprise, they actually do exist, and while they aren't the most spedrun genre out there, there's a decently sized community behind it. Pretty much every single roguelike I've played has a leaderboard on speedrun.com, and new additions are still being made for most of them, even the older games. Now I know, from the looks of it, they seem like an albeit smaller community, but still mostly in line with every other genre being spedrun, so what makes them different? Well, it has to do with exactly what a roguelike is, and why trying to speedrun it kinda throws everything out of whack. Any roguelike that exists is built on the premise of a randomly generated game. All roguelikes share this fact, and while they execute it in different ways, the fact is still true. On every single run of a roguelike, you replay the same game, but randomly different. Roguelikes are inconsistent between runs. That's a big piece of what makes a roguelike. And while that's great for a new, refreshing, and enjoyable video game archetype, that's not the best for speedrunning. Why? Well, one of the more critical pieces of being able to speedrun a game is consistency. Practicing a speedrun in many cases involves repeatedly taking the same or similar routes across a game in a faster fashion than other people. While the routes and things you do on a speedrun may vary, locally inside of a speedrun you are attempting, you take the same route and do the same or similar actions which have been proven to be fastest over and over and over again, until you are able to successfully complete the route fastest. Take Super Mario 64 as example. Ignoring all of that, the bare essence of doing the speedrun is taking a route that you have identified or found as containing the most and best time saves, and successfully completing that route with those time saves. This involves constant practice of the same sections of the game as you try to get better at doing the sections correctly and quickly. This is best exemplified in something called a task, or a tool-assisted speedrun. A task is basically a series of inputs pre-recorded onto a mechanized tool, like an emulator, which allows a speedrunner to virtually perfectly execute parts of or an entire speedrun. A task enables speedrunners to record and execute inhuman frame-perfect moves and actions that will consistently take place regardless of how many times a task is run, as it always does the exact same set of pre-recorded actions every time it is run. Now, this works because a game that is being spedrun is assumed to be consistent. The task is not able to adapt to its situation like a human, it just spits out the list of commands that was pre-recorded into it. But because the game in question, or at least the segment the task is handling, is assumed to be constant and unchanging, the task works. And the task can be coded to be precise to near infinitely small margins. But what if that wasn't true? What if that little scuttlebug was randomly moved one parallel universe left on one run, and 3 parallel universes right on another? Well, then you'd have a roguelike speedrun. You see, tasks don't work on roguelike speedruns, because the game is ever-changing. There is no consistency to deeply analyze and dissect to get frame-perfect movement, it's nearly all spontaneous. This means that the speedrunner of a roguelike is forced to adapt to those changes while adhering to the principle of taking the route that completes the game the fastest. This basically creates an incredibly interesting situation in which speedrunners are forced to adapt on the fly while also trying to complete the game in the fastest fashion possible. Don't know what I mean? Good, because neither do I. Let's just look at an example, the Risk of Rain 2 speedrun. Most speedrunners on the Risk of Rain 2 leaderboard take similar approaches to beating the game, each run going for certain items with a certain character and a certain map route, hinting in similarity to a normal speedrun outside the roguelike genre. But the complete randomness of every other part of the game is where it gets interesting. It creates incredibly fun to watch scenarios in which a speedrunner is forced to constantly adapt to their situation to try to beat the game in the fastest way possible. Now, I know, in Risk of Rain 2 specifically, there are methods to streamline the experience such as artifacts, but my point still stands, as there is randomness in the bosses, enemy spawns, etc. that makes the game random. And the no artifacts category, my personal favorite, totally opens the doors to completely different runs from run to run on the leaderboard, truly putting to the test the adaptiveness and game knowledge-ness of each speedrunner, being forced to change their strategy on a whim entirely at random. And it is so wacky and fun to watch. Something about how the speedrunners just effortlessly slash through the game regardless of their builds and layouts is so satisfying to watch. Regardless of the enemy spawns and attacks and hazards, it's like they just knew what was coming and acted on it, which to me is just so impressive. As another couple personal favorite examples, the Enter the Gungeon and bullets per minute speedruns feel so smooth and gratifying to behold, especially the latter. I personally know the difficulty, well, to me, of these games, which is probably influencing my mindset, but still, just watching the speedrunners navigate a random assortment of rooms, effortlessly slaying enemies, making split-second decisions on items to take and things to buy, traversing the dungeon like it's the back of their hand, never so sure what the next boss or skip is that could possibly save full seconds of a run is just so gripping to watch. And seeing the builds they make as they do this, always so out of the box but somehow insane builds at the same time, is just the cherry on top. Even with the more standard, quote, good items in the BPM and Enter the Gungeon speedruns, the builds the players ended up with from run to run were still just so like, wow, that's actually good, I never thought that combo would do that good, and you just built it in like 2-second choices. And most importantly, this randomness forced the runner to think outside the box with what they would take and combo with what they had to get the most broken, speedy build they could, which I feel like is a very entertaining thing to watch in combination with the speedrunner's sheer speed. Now, I know, if you watch the runs, you will see a lot of instances of the players just grabbing whatever item was there. But especially in the earlier stages, there were still choices to be made that had a big influence on the end build. And watching the runner craft their build while just trying to be fast is again enjoyable to watch. It's like, I watch and I'm like, what item are they going to take? Is it more efficient to skip to save time, or should they risk a trip to a shop or chest room for a potentially run-altering item? That could blow up in their face, but maybe not. Maybe they can go smoothly enough already and they want to wait for another room. That feeling kinda died down as the runs progressed and the players started to become too OP to really need more items. And there were definitely some similarities in builds in the top runs, especially in choices you could determine before the game even started, like your character. But that still doesn't retract far from the run, because you can see how the choices the runner made turned them into what they were in the end, and see how they navigate their rooms so much faster. And additionally, the way the runners just immediately clear through rooms like they just passed through them 10 seconds ago is so cool to me, because I know that doesn't just happen. I have many hours on several roguelikes, and I couldn't name you more than 10 room layouts for each. So just seeing them just know everything, I guess, even though they probably don't, is for sure adding to the experience. Seeing all this come together in the end, the RNG, the build choices, the skillful hand of the speedrunners, was just so cool that it literally made me verbally root for them when they got that good item they needed. That smooth room clear they wanted, that awesome layout they could work with in their situation. It was just fun to watch. And again, I know that's just kind of speedrunning in general if I'm being honest, but that knowledge of how random the occurrence of that run was, on top of how well the speedrunner handled the RNG, almost as if they were a task, made it just that much more fun to watch. Also, I like roguelikes, so probably a factor there as well, but still, check them out. They're cool. All in all, I suppose roguelike speedruns aren't exactly like the most novel, crazy things, considering the insane speedruns that exist out there, and the fact that several other game genres have a bit of randomness in them as well. But the entire premise of speedrunning something that theoretically isn't really speedrunnable by conventional means, it's just an interesting idea to me. So I thought I'd divulge my thought process there with y'all. I don't know, and this is some personal news about the channel, so if you don't care about that, you can sign off at this point. But now that I'm back to making content, I'm kind of just jumping topics in gaming that interest me at this rate, so long as they provide some kind of interesting value to y'all. It's been like almost a year since I last uploaded, and in that time, I've kind of thought about the channel, and I've come to the conclusion that I might switch things up a little bit, since y'all seem to be alright with that. So, I don't know, how was this video? Was it bad compared to my previous ones? Was it good? The same? Let me know. I'm probably just going to keep experimenting with videos like this in the future, nothing drastic, just branching out to other topics than strictly roguelike analysis. I do have a full-time job at the moment as well, however, so I'm probably not going to be able to put out a ton of videos, but I'm gonna try my best. And that also means that I want to make sure what I'm doing is, like, enjoyable, since I may be posting less. So I do want to hear y'all's feedback about if these videos are working or if my topics are dumb. So yeah, I'm rambling, I'm gonna stop talking now. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I will see you soon in the next video. See ya.